Berlioz. Just the name is enough to terrify any harpist, and for good reason. Today we are going to be talking about Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique and the notorious harp part. Hi, I am Danielle Kuntz. I'm a new music harpist and harp notation coach for composers, and my goal is to help you learn how to write for the harp with creativity and confidence. So today we're going to be delving into the harp part for Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique. Today we're going to be focusing primarily on Harp 1, since that's the part that is usually found in orchestra auditions. Now, like I said, this piece does have two parts. Historically, this has been played by 4 harpists, 2 on each part just to create more volume. That's something that Berlioz had instructed. Interestingly, however, Berlioz had trouble finding harpists that could actually play this part. The writings say Berlioz wrote extensively in his memoirs of his trials and tribulations in having the symphony performed due to a lack of capable harpists and harps in Germany. So this piece is very demanding for the harp, it's very demanding for the harpist. I do want to point out that this piece, we don't really consider it idiomatic for the modern harp. However, it was written for an earlier version of the pedal harp. It would have been the Erard Gothic harp, which would have been much smaller, lighter tension, and the strings would have been closer together. So some things would have been easier, like the fast arpeggios would have been a little bit easier on the earlier harps. However, those harps would not have gotten the amount of sound that the modern harp is capable of doing. So using 4 harps might have been a solution for the earlier harps. It may or may not actually be necessary when playing this on the modern pedal harp. Now, we can't be too hard on Berlioz because the harp was really still in its infancy at this time. Yes, the harp is one of the oldest instruments, but it's also one of the most recently evolved instruments. Berlioz was writing right about the time that the double action pedal harp had actually been invented. Before that, we had the single action pedal harp, meaning that the action can make one change. So in those harps, each string had the possibility of playing 2 pitches. You could go from natural to sharp or flat to natural. On the modern harp, we have a double action pedal harp, meaning that you can shift the notes, make 2 changes between the strings, or each string has 3 available pitches. On the modern harp, you can tune it to flat, and then by changing pedals, you also get access to playing each string in natural and sharp. So you have access to flat, natural, and sharp. Berlioz was absolutely fascinated by this. He wrote about it extensively in his orchestration treatise, and he said he would love to see a triple action pedal harp, which would give us 4 pitches per string. Thankfully, we have not actually gotten this developed. I think we have enough to deal with the double action pedal harp. But Berlioz was very forward thinking and was very excited about the new capabilities of the harp. So he really was a pioneer. His writings are very interesting. He was also very fascinated by the virtuoso harpist, Elias Pearce-Alvarez, who was another pioneer in the harp. He's also considered the Liszt of the harp, so that may explain why us mere mortals find this harp part so difficult. Now for more of the historical context, this is also the first piece where the harp is found in symphony orchestra. Before this, the harp had made its appearance in opera and ballet, but this was the first time the harp was actually in a symphony. But on that note, since the harp was a common trope that you found in opera and ballet, it is interesting that this is a very programmatic piece and that the harp only appears in the second movement and ball, which is the waltz, the ballroom dancing scene. So Berlioz definitely used the contemporary tropes of his time when adding the harp into this piece. Now, from a practical perspective, yes, Berlioz did avoid some of the biggest errors in writing. However, I find this part to still be pretty pianistic. It is very awkward, and we'll talk through some of those sections. Now, the opening of this piece has these arpeggios that alternate between the 2 harps. Orchestrationally, this actually works really, really well. It starts out really quiet with the tremolo and the low strings, and then the harp comes in with these beautiful arpeggios. And then the second harp will play an F sharp minor arpeggio, and then the harp comes back, first harp comes back with an F sharp major arpeggio. And on like that. A quick note for harpists who are watching this, I really like fingering these arpeggios with 3 in the left hand, 4 in the right hand, 3 in the right hand. This was a trick I got from Krista Grix actually, and it helps you accent the beats a little bit better. The fingering that I had gotten originally was doing 4, which works fine. It just doesn't allow you to accent the beats quite in the same way. Now the first rewrite we have is right before rehearsal 21. The original has us doing. Now, we don't have a whole lot of finger independence just with the way that we play the harp between fingers 2 and 3. So pairing 1 and 2 with 3 is awkward at best, and you're not going to be able to get the volume that you need in here. So the standard rewrite for this is to just tweak it slightly, play the thumb alone, and then fingers 2 and 3 together. The quintessential moment in this movement is where everyone drops out and the harp does this downward scale. It works really well. It's a little bit nerve-wracking, but we all play scales. This one isn't actually too bad. So after this, the strings will come in, they'll play the melody, and then the harp comes in. Both harps will come in with this little melody here. This is pretty awkward. I say, so this movement comes back again a little bit later. I think I like the way that the second way is written better. But in terms of the orchestration, this first time is a little bit more exposed. So since this is found on audition so much, yes, we play it, we practice it, we have to play it well. There's just a lot of little things in here that are really uncomfortable and don't really fit well with the harp. So this back and forth pattern eliminates the groupings that we usually find on the harp. Grouping more fingers together works a lot better than grouping just 2 fingers back and forth. Harpists will do a sort of cross pattern here to make it a little bit more doable, so that way you're not shifting up every single beat. You can shift up a group of 4, shift up, but then cross fingering is obviously a little bit more difficult than playing notes in order. The other thing that I don't really like is having these low chords right here. It's very prone to buzzing, and honestly, you're not going to hear those quite as well in the orchestration. This is a section that might have been better served by dropping the left hand and allowing both hands to divvy up the top line. My opinion, don't come after me here. So, and then the other difficult moment here is the end of the first half of the phrase, when you have these pairings of 1, 2, and 4. Number 1, this is just kind of an awkward pattern. There's not really a great workaround for this. Number 2, this really gets your hand stuck down here when the next measure really has you jumping up. So it's a little bit awkward. That's usually one of my trouble spots as I'm performing this. I really have to practice getting between that measure and the next measure. I also just practice starting the next measure, so that no matter what happens in the previous measure, I know I can just get back into it in the second phrase. So that's the first section of this piece. The next page, you have these arpeggios again. And then the harp plays on offbeats. And that's all fine. And so on. Then you have a long tacit where you can relax, breathe a little bit, but try not to get your hands too cold, because you are back with the opening melody again. This time you have more arpeggios in the left hand. For some reason, I find that it helps me anchor myself a little bit better, for better or worse. only way to play this is to focus more on the direction, going up and going down rather than focusing on every single note, just so you don't get tripped up. This one does have a little section where we have to do a finger slide. Professionals are generally comfortable with finger slides. This one, you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare for it, so that does make it a little bit riskier, but you really don't have time to do a crossover, so you have to do and on like that. Now you have this two-handed arpeggio here with no one plays that as written. It's too fast, there's too many notes, it really doesn't work. There's two options here. If you really want to have two arpeggios, obviously you're not going to play that chord right there, but you can use enharmonics to make the pattern a little bit easier. So you can play, instead of C sharp, play D flat, instead of E, play F flat, then you have a D flat major chord, and you can do it like that. Honestly, it's still risky that way, and I think I can get more volume by playing just one hand rather than two. So by dividing it between the hands, I think I can project a little bit better than by trying to do. That's just me. Different harpists do feel differently about it. So this next section is another section that's usually found on auditions. Usually in auditions, they'll ask you to play the first page, and then you'll jump to rehearsal 32. My instinct is that they're usually trying to make sure that you've listened to the score and that you know the approximate timing of these rallentandos, because they're really expansive. It's not just like a little slowdown, it's a big slowdown. And coming right back in, playing the tempo. When you get back to these odd tempos, making sure you can jump right in. Again, this is a thick texture. I'm not really sure that having this left hand is really adding a whole lot to the texture, whereas having the harp doubling the melody might actually add more. That's just my instinct here. Now the animato section does push a little bit. Overall, it's not too bad. At rehearsal 33, we do the exact same thing and usually just drop the bottom hand, just because you can project a lot more if you're splitting arpeggio between the hands versus playing it doubled. And you need this to be loud. This has to be loud here. The first really dicey section, or this next dicey section, is at 34 with these arpeggios in the right hand. For some reason, these just are trippy. Of course, it goes much faster. Like that. And of course you have to play it loud here. And this, cha-cha section that you have here in the left hand, that's definitely tricky with these left hand jumps. Again, being able to play it loud and playing the jumps and playing it all accurately. Would it be better to do, interestingly, the harp 2 part here only has one note in the left hand, 2 parts in the right hand. So maybe you're relying more on harp 2 to fill in the volume than harp 1. Just an idea here. Versus something like that. So that's something to think through. And then this section ends with, again, I would love to do that. I could do that all day versus and then you come back to the clarinet solo. That's really the motive throughout this, and then the harp accompanies it with, until you get to the end with the tempo 1 con fuoco, which means you go fast here. Honestly, this is probably my least favorite section through the whole piece because there's no way you're hearing the harp, and this is just awkward. With playing this fast, I can't get enough volume in the left hand to really bring it out. Maybe you could do it if you did it with just one hand. I'm not sure. I don't like this section very much, in all honesty. And then, it's fine through the rest. I will just make a comment at the end. Some orchestras will do a small ritardando on the last 2 measures, with the, which definitely helps it, but not all orchestras do this. So if you're a harpist preparing this part, don't assume that. Just make sure that you can play the third beat really lightly so that you can land on the final notes. So is what you have to do here. That's really where this is at. It's an awkward excerpt, but we all have to play it, so we figured out how to play it well. Should you use this as a model of good harp writing? Please don't. But you can, this is worth studying, seeing the edits the harpists have made and seeing how we can work around this specific part. If you're a harpist preparing this, I recommend doing lots of slow practice and fast practice. So the slow practice, you can use this as a warm-up. Just like, every day, play it through those sections really slowly, but then also play it fast because you can't get caught up in all the individual notes. You have to just push forward to the top and push down. Focus on the movement of the phrase rather than, getting in all the individual notes. So in kind of in summary of all of this, what I want you to consider is making sure that the voices that you're writing on the harp, you're using strategically. I think Berlioz was starting to think through this, but more modern composers have fleshed this out a little bit better. So looking at how Debussy uses the harp in like La Mer is a more up-to-date way of thinking through the harp rather than this specific piece. In general, you can sometimes get more volume from the harp just because of the way that the harp rings. You can get more volume by a single line rather than playing more notes. Like in these arpeggios, rather than doubling the arpeggio, we can actually get more volume, meaning the harp can be heard by playing a single line. So I hope this helps. Hope this gives you some insights into Berlioz and Symphony Fantastique and why harpists are still terrified of it. If you have questions about this excerpt or if there's other excerpts you'd like me to review, leave a comment below. If you're interested in seeing a comparison of Harp 1 and Harp 2 in this part, let me know that in the comments as well. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and if you haven't already done so, let's stay in touch. Sign up for the Harp Tips emails that I send out once or twice a month with different tips on how to effectively write for the harp. So that's everything for now. I will see you next time.